What's up, everybody? As I'm grading the Great Thinker definitions, I've noticed a lot of themes coming up, so I thought it would be helpful. I'm trying to put like pretty substantive comments on everybody's, um, because I'm trying to not beat up on you too hard in terms of grades, because part of this process is just learning to try out ideas and think through things. So the definition that you give might not work at all, but I'm not going to say, well, F for that. But I do want to give you some feedback that points out to you that, well, you might want to revisit this before you write your big Great Thinker paper. But in addition to the individual feedback, since there were so many themes, I wanted to provide this video. So I just want to go over a couple of things that I saw a lot of. So the first thing that I think is the hardest thing to deal with, I just kind of made up this term, neutrality paradox, but the thing that I think is super hard to deal with in this paper is the question of, does a great idea have to be beneficial, or should it be transformative whether or not it's beneficial? So a lot of people said like a great idea should benefit society or humanity or the world. And you just want to be careful of that, because society, humanity, the world, all people, things like that are so broad that you might be making it impossible, because most ideas or evolutions benefit some group of people but may either not benefit another group of people or might negatively impact a group of people. So I'm drawn to the idea that a great thinker should be a beneficial one, but you might really work on nuancing how you think about what it means to be beneficial, right? It must benefit some group of people, or it must move society further ahead in some particular way. Or maybe it just transforms the way that we think. So just think about that. Terms like society, humanity, the world are so broad that it becomes impossible, because you're literally saying it helps everybody. But on the other hand, right, I'm also drawn to the idea that great ideas, that it's more helpful to think of great ideas as transformative than beneficial. The problem with that is that I am worried about like the Hitler problem, which is, if you say that a great idea transforms our world, and you don't say anything about it being transformed for the worse or for the better, you open the door to including as great thinkers people who have had some of the most destructive ideas in history. And so you could do that. You could argue that, like, yes, these people still deserve the title of great thinker. And here's why. I think you're playing with fire when you do that. I think that's a really hard argument to make, which then suggests that there is this sort of linkage, right? That it's transformational and it has to be beneficial or disruptive in some way. But if it's, maybe it can't be universally accepted as good, but it can't be universally accepted as bad and still be a great idea. So just really think about that a lot and work through that in your minds. The other thing is a piece of advice. A couple of you did this well, but I was surprised that it wasn't most of you. I think it really helps to start by looking at the book and, okay, my definition would actually exclude 3 of the people we've already read. Do I want that to be the case? One thing that I think is helpful is like, okay, we've only read 6, 7 thinkers so far, but what do they have in common? Do they have anything in common? And go from there. Now, a lot of these people have a lot of things in common, but the thing that you have to be careful about is that you don't want to be too broad. So I would say, maybe at least half of you had, and a lot of you had the same items, but I just put a lot of terms that I saw showing up in multiple papers, that great thinkers should be open-minded, curious, able to make connections, take information, use it a new way. They should be courageous. They should have critical thinking skills. They should be observant. They should be deliberative, have multiple perspectives. Those sound like great qualities to me. My concern, though, is that if you just take those qualities, whether you take all of these qualities or some subset of them, that seems to include good honor students. That you'd all be great thinkers, right? That, like, I would want for you to be open-minded, curious people who are able to make connections and critically think and be observant and see multiple perspectives. And often outcomes of courses say that students should be able to do these things by the end of the semester. So while you might include some of these things as necessary components of being a great thinker, I would caution you about thinking that they are sufficient to make people a great thinker. I think many of you listed these thinking a great thinker should have these qualities. And maybe they should, but again, like what I said in class, I said be aware of the difference between necessary and sufficient. Maybe they should have these qualities, but are those qualities sufficient to make them a great thinker? And if not, what else would they need? And this is where I think maybe combining some of these qualities with talking about a great idea is going to be important. The other thing I'll say here is realize that when you do your great thinker paper, you can't necessarily see any of these things about your person. You don't know how you might be able to know about how curious they were or how open-minded they were. But you may or may not know whether they were afraid of failing. They might have had the courage to keep going despite their fear. But think about, okay, as I think about a living great thinker, what could I actually learn about them? I can learn about some of their personal characteristics, but the thing I'm going to be able to learn about them the most is their ideas. So I would encourage you to sort of shift your focus a little in that direction. The other thing to be a little bit careful of is just, if one concern is being too broad, the other is being too narrow, like leaving people out by accident, right? So, one word that's always tricky is unique. I think you should always be careful of words like all, never. Unique is overused in our society. We mean it as if it means rare, but unique really means one of a kind. So if we say a great thinker is unique in some ways, you're sort of saying they are the only one who has these qualities, and that might be too narrow. So the other thing is, when you think of thinkers, some of you said that thinkers should be unbiased or they should represent a compromise. Is that the case? Lao Tzu and Machiavelli and Martin Luther King and Thoreau and everyone we've read have very distinct points of view. They are biased, right? They said, this is the view I am advocating for. It is better than an alternative. I think what might be meant sometimes when we think about unbiased is that people ought not to be closed-minded, but just understand the difference. And then also this idea of representing a compromise. I think that's a great idea when we're trying to navigate a difficult challenge. You have people on this side and people on this side, and a great leader might be able to navigate that balance and come to some pragmatic solution. But, I don't know that Wolf is representing a compromise. I don't know that Thoreau is representing a compromise. So while that might be a nice quality, just be careful that you don't list something that would exclude someone that you think should definitely be a great thinker. All right, I know this probably makes it harder rather than easier, but that's the point. I want you to keep thinking about this, but now as you think about it, and think about how would this work if I were to apply it to a particular person, and then if I was going to try to defend that person as meeting the definition. What evidence would I be able to find and use to help do that? All right, cool.